Mr. Conor Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a pleasure to participate at the late stage of this debate on this important matter and to follow my honourable friend from Peterborough. We are both distinguished members of a very small group of ex-PPSs, resigned PPSs to the former Northern Ireland Secretary, and he may hear some echoes of his views in what I am about to say. It was also a pleasure to listen to the speech, the contribution of my right honourable friend, the former Chief Whip and Patronage Secretary. I think his knowledgeable contribution on this debate will show how much he will be missed from this House after the next general election. Mr. Speaker, today this is Parliament talking about Parliament. And I am conscious as I look around, I look up at those who look down on us literally and metaphorically, and I don't see very many of them. And I look, my honourable friend who's just left the chamber from Devon referred to us being in a goldfish bowl this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, there aren't not many people looking in to this particular goldfish bowl this afternoon. When we're voting to vote about bombing Syria or gassing badgers, this place is surrounded by members of the public seeking to tell us their views. Our inboxes are full of emails and our correspondence rates go up. That has not been the case in the build-up to this debate today. I'm very pleased to see my honourable friend, the member for Clacton, back on his place on the lower gangway on the opposition benches. He reminded us probably one of the only cases where we have seen what a recall looks like in Winchester in 1997. And I declare an interest in that, Mr. Speaker. You may well indeed remember it, for the Conservative candidate in that Winchester by-election, who had been the Member of Parliament for Winchester up until that 1997 general election, was one Jerry Malone. And Jerry Malone carried the very high office of Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, responsible for youth, and it was Mr. Malone who showed his commitment to democracy by overturning the elected results of the student elections that elected me as National Chairman and appointed my successor. I thought it was ironic that he then called that a consultation exercise. He then went on to find out what being on the wrong end of a consultation exercise in Winchester felt like some years later. I'm sorry that the honourable gentleman, the member for Rhondda, is not in his place. It was an eloquent but characteristically depressing speech from the honourable gentleman, the member for Rhondda. I have, Mr. Speaker, in my office this week a young man in the sixth form from my old school at St Columba's in St Albans who is doing some work experience, and he told me with great pride that he had spotted an error in the honourable gentleman, the member for Rhondda's speech, where he referred to the Great Reform Act of 1830. It was, of course, 1832. I'm very pleased to see that the standard of history teaching by my old history teacher, Mr. Byrne, is alive and well in St Columba's today. Numbers of people have talked about trust, and trust goes to the heart of this. And they have talked about the expenses scandal. And can I say this, Mr. Speaker? I viewed the expenses scandal as a member of the public. As many other members who were elected at the last general election looked on in despair at what happened during the expenses scandal. And I understand still that so many in this House who lived through that were so scarred by it that actually they don't feel able to stand up and say that that was a small minority of people who did wrong, who were rightly punished. It is wrong that this House continues to sit back and take the flak for something that is now in the past when there is a new regime in place. And those of us who were elected in 2010 came in here, we believe, on all sides, with a mandate to restore that bond of trust between this place and the electorate. And we have tried to do that in everything we have done and everything we have said in our constituencies. And for this thing that, we're all the same, the political class are useless, really, every honourable and right honourable gentleman and lady in this place must be able to tell experiences almost on a weekly basis of people who come to our surgeries in abject despair, and because of the two letters after our names, we are able to escalate their issue into the hands of somebody who can sort it out. If we lose faith in this place ourselves, we will deserve to fall into public contempt. I assert that it is time that this Chamber of Parliament stands up again and bravely says to the British people, this is the cockpit of parliamentary democracy in Britain. This is where we resolve issues by debate and argument. This is a place that is populated by people who are motivated by generous, good and decent instincts to do their best for their country and for their constituencies. But I do assert, Mr. Speaker, that one of the reasons that people have disengaged from politics is because, as the late Tony Benn once said from those benches, this place has swapped power for status. You're a member of Parliament, you get asked to go on the television, but you're afraid to exercise the powers that are vested in you from your constituents in the lobbies to powerfully stand up to the executive. We have shuffled off power to the European Union. We've shuffled off power, unelected quangos, to people we do not elect and cannot remove. And I think it is vital in the years ahead that this House confidently starts to bring some of those powers back to this place and exercise them in the name of our constituents who sent us here. The honourable gentleman, the member for Foyle, I thought his comment about Enoch Powell having a good majority in his South Down seat because he tipped his hat at the local electorate was a novel one. I'm not sure that rushing out and buying trilbies and tipping them to our local electorate is the full source of the solution to the problem we find ourselves in. But he made reference to Burke, and I have to say I'm delighted that Edmund Burke, that great conservative philosopher, has now been liberated again from behind the bookshop in St Stephen's Hall and can be seen as an inspiration to all of us. It was Burke who said, in that famous speech to his electors in Bristol, that we as members of Parliament owe our constituents our judgment above all else, and that we betray them and not serve them if we sacrifice our judgment to their opinion. And it is absolutely right that during the course of a Parliament, we in this place will vote for unpopular measures. I remember a few years ago, I've told this story before, telling Lady Thatcher that the Conservative Party was 9% behind in the polls. And she asked when the next election was. I said it was about 3.5 years away. She said, that's not far enough behind at this stage. It is up to us as politicians to take decisions confident in our judgments and confident that over time they will be shown to be right. I used the example recently of same-sex marriage. I agonised over how to vote on that as a practising Catholic and an openly gay man. And if I had listened to those in my constituency whose voice was loudest, whose email send button was pushed the most often, I would have gone into the lobby against that legislation. But I decided that I owed them my judgment. And I believe, while I may not have earned their support on it, I am certain from the reaction afterwards and from the line I took to them that I have earned their respect. And that, to me, is much more important. The respect is much more important as an aspiration than to be liked. When I resigned from the little ridiculous role I had as a PPS to vote against the Lords, Reform Lords, I give way to my honour friend, of course.
Honourable friend for giving way. He's making a very, very powerful speech. And just on that last point in relation to gay marriage, can I ask him if would he have taken a different decision had there been a regime of recall of the sort that I and colleagues are proposing? Would he have taken a different decision, or would he have felt obliged to take a different vote differently?
That's a very good question, and as honourable ladies and gentlemen who have known me, many in this chamber, yourself included, Mr Speaker, for more than 20 years, my honourable friend from Clacton opposite, knows that I have consistently put my principles ahead of promotion. I wouldn't have sacrificed the national chairmanship of the Conservative students to oppose Maastricht in 1993, and I certainly wouldn't go through the lobby in this place anymore for something that I don't fundamentally believe in. And it's a liberating experience when you decide to do that. I give way again to my honourable friend.
Of knowing why he thinks others might as a consequence of recall. What is it about recall, or what is it about this House that makes him feel that the existence of recall would enfeeble Parliament as opposed to strengthen it in the way that he has just demonstrated?
The honourable friend has given me an excellent introduction to how I wanted to end this. I will support the government's bill ably brought in by not angry of Tunbridge Wells but moderate and very sensible of Tunbridge Wells, and I will look forward to the amendments coming forward from my honourable friend when this bill goes into committee stage, because I think they do need to be probed. What I wanted to end by saying is this. When I resigned from that role as a PPS to vote against a bill that I fundamentally opposed, fundamentally believed would damage Parliament, I did so in the knowledge that that would lead to a sacrifice. As a friend of mine said, you're a genius, you've established yourself as a person of principle over an issue that nobody really cares about. I suppose there was an element of truth in that. But what I want to know, and this is why I want, and my honourable friend North West Hampshire made this point absolutely brilliantly, I want to understand how my honourable friend's amendments, if he amends the bill, can separate out sanction on personal probity issues against people who take policy positions. And I assert that in this House you must be able to take a policy decision, a difference of philosophical understanding on an issue, and be confident that you will be judged at that over time at the next general election. Issues of personal conduct are completely separate, and if the honourable gentleman can convince me and others, and we are open-minded, that you can separate out a policy and probity, we will be open-minded as to how we vote.
Mr Graham Stewart.